Yeah, yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So, I want to give you a heads up. I don't know if I told you, I'm currently in Africa. I'm in Ghana, and it's not as technologically advanced. So, if we get disconnected, you can continue to speak, and the episode is pre-recorded, and I'll edit it.
Well, we could reschedule too. That's no problem with me. Are you enjoying your Kelly Willy?
Yeah, yeah. I've been in Africa since at least it's been about a year now, so I'm gonna be here for a while.
Okay. Are you a fufu guy, or you're going towards the Ghana version?
Say that again.
Are you a fufu guy, or are you or are you on the other side?
Man, I just had some fufu today. I had fufu and goat and what else did I had some palm nut soup. That's what I had with it.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
Good
yeah, it
stuff.
was pretty good. It was pretty good. So I wanna thank you, most importantly for stopping by on the podcast. This is a true honor. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I definitely look forward to hearing more about it.
Well, thank you for having me, Tyann. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Definitely, definitely. Now, for the viewers who may not recognize you, could you let them know who you are, where you're from, and definitely what do you do?
I'm Michael Stein. I'm executive director of the Harvard Law School Project on Disability, situated here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I teach at Harvard Law School, Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and on occasion at Harvard Medical School.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. I guess I could ask you this: when did you develop this passion for law? Is this something that you've always wanted to do, or did you kind of get into it later in life?
Beginning in college or university, I definitely wanted to teach. But my goal, my choices were either to teach law or to teach medieval history. And I had a wonderful mentor, the late Norman Cantor, who explained that I could do a lot more in the world through law, and also have a more productive life. And going through law school, I still wanted to teach, but it was after experiencing law school, the lack of accessibility. There were no civil rights laws for disabled persons. There was no access. I was very much excluded while being within the halls of privileged power. That I realized that something had to be done about disability rights. Also, I didn't see very many people with disabilities, and also I didn't see many other people from other demographics. But it was later in life, after graduating law school, that I started to begin working on disability rights advocacy, and all my notions of doing legal history and other sort of more standard law professor work went through the window, and I had my moment of being adopted into the disability rights movement.
Okay, okay. So it sounds like you've been doing this for a while. I would like to know, have you seen a significant amount of change in, disability rights?
Oh, absolutely. On just a legal level, we saw the adoption of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. And my previous life of almost 30 years, I didn't have civil rights in that respect. And then the amendments to the ADA and other laws that went into effect, including now globally the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which I was privileged to have helped participate in. So, on the legal level, yes, we've seen advances. On the practical level, just the world has changed. If we're talking strictly about the U.S., when I grew up, there weren't accessible buses or accessible restaurants, and There wasn't the expectation that people with disabilities can and should be able to go wherever they like, just like anyone else, and participate in all aspects of society, whether it's getting into the post office or going to the movies or whatever have you. That's changed socially. We don't do a good job on employment in this country, but as far as getting around, and I'm speaking to you, Taye, in Africa, and I have a chair in Africa, and I've worked in 46 countries. We're very, very well taken care of as far as just being able to go about our daily business and get into public venues and be part of society, including voting. So we have seen it. If you want me to put it in context, over a very short period of time, we can compare when I started law school, attending it in 1985, and there was one dorm room out of all of them that I could enter into and use. And the other dorms, didn't have ramps; they had stairs, no elevators, still don't. There was no kitchen that I could use, no laundry room I could use. The underground tunnels, which protected those of us here in Boston from snow and sleet, were not accessible because there was no elevator into it. The classrooms, I had to sit in the back of the classrooms rather than the front of the classrooms, and so on and so forth. If we jump ahead 20 years to 2005, when I'm back here and I'm teaching a disability rights course, and I tell my students about what it was like just 20 years earlier, which is a small slice of time when you're trying to measure social progress, their eyes look up and they think that's crazy. Yeah, can't do that. That's unbelievable, and that's beautiful. That's beautiful. That in 20 years the expectations went from, you're not guaranteed a hotel room that's accessible. You're not guaranteed you're going to be able to get on the subway. You're not guaranteed you're going to be able to enter even into a public building, to the expectation that, what do you mean? Those things were like that. That's an amazing shift in 20 years. So we've advanced as far as laws. We've also advanced as far as social expectations, and we've advanced just in the day-to-day interactions of what is available to people with disabilities in this country. Outside this country, we have slightly different experiences.
Yeah, definitely. Indeed. I'm a world traveler myself. I've been to about 70 countries, so I can attest to that firsthand. It's different for each country. And, I grew up, I had family members in the house that had disabilities. And, like you say, over the years, you could see some things change where they're more accommodating, they're able to go. Where back in the day, it was like, well, it's no place for them to go. You know what I'm saying? So things are changed to a degree.
And doing the work both here in the US and abroad lends perspective. So, on the one hand, comparing the US to many other countries or to most other countries, those of us who have disabilities are highly privileged. Right? We're treated much better. We have better access to health care and so on. Um, However, if we were to turn our view back to the US, we have to kind of scratch our heads and ask why there's nearly 700,000 people on waiting lists in order to get community and home based services and have a life of dignity. Why are we entering into 2025 with a new presidential administration that's threatening to cut Medicaid and home and community based services and uses highly ableist and other hateful language directed at the group, and what do we need to anticipate going forward? um, you know, we have to not feel safe. We can't be complacent. Civil rights, human rights always have to be guarded vigilantly. They're precious, and we're in for some interesting years coming up.
Definitely, definitely. And I wanted to ask you about the Harvard Law School project on disability. If you could speak about the process of co-founding it and also your role as executive director.
Sure. Well, the Harvard Law School Project on Disability, which we refer to as HPOD, HPOD, like an iPod, only cooler. And well, everyone is welcome to visit our website. It's at www.hpod.org. You're welcome to sign up and attend events, use the resources on the website, download them. It's a human rights website. Everything is available and free. It was co-founded with Vice Dean Alford of the law school in 20 years ago. We've worked in 46 countries. I myself have worked on the ground in 46 or more countries, and then more virtually. We are, I would say, the leading academic and advocacy organization. What we think about academically influences what we do in practice and in reality. And problems that we see in reality affect what we think about and write about academically. We're housed in the law school. I have the privilege of teaching at Harvard Law School, but also at Harvard Kennedy School of Government and on occasion at the Harvard Medical School. And so there's also the ability to interact with students. We work on many different levels, from the sort of highest ethereal levels of trying to write legal protections for people with disabilities. I was privileged to have participated in the UN drafting of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, first human rights treaty of the 21st century, ratified by nearly every UN state, although not the United States. Um, I've worked with governments in revising or commenting on their constitutions, their national disability laws, worked with ministries on policies and implementation. I've had the privilege of working with DPOs, disabled people's organizations, groups of people organized around, by, and for people with disabilities to claim their rights and to help them empower themselves. And I do that in response to their requests with great joy and great humility and with open ears and open heart. And we also work as academics. So again, what we see in the real world influences our writing, and that influences the real world. A really simple example of that was, the crimes against humanity, which there's a treaty that's starting to develop at the UN, and the word disability doesn't appear in it, which is really strange because human rights and crimes against humanity all began with Nuremberg, and the first group to be focused on by the Nazis and by the tribunal were people with disabilities. So we have made interventions, submissions at the UN to try to change that course and to make sure disability is included. Another area is climate change. 80% of people with disabilities globally live in the global south, live in developing countries. There's altogether about 1.4 billion of us. And yet climate change does not formally include disability. And 80% of the parties to the Paris Agreement, that's the big global agreement that countries agree to reduce greenhouse emissions, improve the world, and so on. 80% of those national plans don't even have the D word in it, don't have disability in it. So we have been writing academic pieces and trying to advocate at court level and other places for the inclusion of people with disabilities. So again, what we see as missing in the real world influences what we do as academics, influences in turn again what we do in the real world.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Now, if I can ask you this, what difficulties do you face when you find yourself trying to get, people with disabilities included in these documents and in getting these laws changed? What exactly is the pushback?
Well, there's two levels of pushback. One is we have millennia of stigma and stereotyping and prejudice against people with disabilities as not being as capable, not being as competent, not giving value added to being part of inclusion. That is slowly changing, but we still see it, indoctrinated in many places. So one of the issues in the U.S. at the moment, for right or wrong, is pushback against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll just note that something like 95% of corporate America's DEI plans don't include people with disabilities. It's as if, disabled employees, customers, and others just don't matter. So part of it is this stigma, and it gets expressed mostly in a what I call malign neglect. It's not so much we hate you, go away, you don't belong, but it's more of we don't even conceive of the group as being part of the agenda. And so, whether it's the UN work, like treaties developing, or whether it's national level programming, or whether it's climate change, the countries and others go forward, corporations go forward, and just don't think that disability is part of this world. Another example that relates to what we just shared was there's a developing, business and human rights treaty. In the entire world, there's only been two academic pieces written about disability and business and human rights, and I'm the co-author on both of them. But yet, think about these multinational corporations. They're often larger and more powerful and bigger budgets than many countries around the world. Not only do they have the ability to employ people with disabilities, they can affect what products are developed. Is software going to be developed that includes people with disabilities? Will information and communication technology be inclusive and empowering, or will it be exclusive and create greater equity gaps? Do we consider that we might have customers as people with disabilities? But disability doesn't even appear in that dialogue. So really, what if I had to describe the agenda in one sentence, it's trying to have disability included where the group is relevant, but not acknowledged as being relevant.
Okay, okay. I appreciate you breaking that down. Now, I wanted to ask you about some of your work in the Netherlands and South Africa. Now, to my understanding, you were teaching at the Free University of Amsterdam. If you could speak about that experience.
Well, I'm still connected to the VU, the Free University of Amsterdam, and I supervise PhD students. I haven't been teaching there for a while. To respond to your question more closely, I'm honored to have an extraordinary professorship uh, chair at the University of Pretoria in South Africa, and I get to teach there once or twice a year. I also supervise graduate students, and I try to support their work as best I can. The Center for Human Rights is a hub for teaching about disability rights across Africa. They connect with other universities and law schools across the glorious continent. And the students and the teachers and the graduate students will come to Pretoria not only twice a year for 1 week mini course, but also enroll in academic masters and PhDs. And it's just a joy to work with them.
Wow, okay, that sounds amazing. Now I can ask you this. Um, you were the first person with a disability to be a member of the Harvard Law Review. Is that something that you were aware of while you were in the process of doing it, or did you kind of find out later?
Oh, I was very aware of it, and it's of course, first means as far as we know. Um, when I came up and was preparing to come to the law school, and I met with the dean of students and was told about all the lack of accessibility. Don't think about having a kitchen. Don't think about having a laundry. She also said, don't even think about the Harvard Law Review, which is the most prestigious accolade you could have here at the law school. Remember, President Obama was a member of it, was the president of it. My classmate Michelle Obama was here, although she wasn't part of the law review. And they said, don't even think about it. And at that point, it was located, and still is located, in this white clapboard house that I could just about see through my window. And there were stairs. There were no elevators. There were no accommodations provided. And for my first year, I actually dragged myself up and down the stairs in order to be a participant in it. And in my last year, I made them provide a room on the ground floor where I could do my work. But of course, that isolated me from most of my peers. There's a story I remember very well. The late Equal Employment Opportunity Commission Commissioner Paul Miller, who was 2 years ahead of me in law school and was a little person and was a disability rights advocate. He also worked closely with the Obama administration during his time there in various roles. He called me up. He had just graduated. He had heard I made law review, and he called me up and said, "Congratulations! Now, how the hell are you going to get up the stairs?" And I did, and it was year 100, volume 100, so a century of exclusion, and I got to break that glass ceiling. Um, the people who came after me who had physical disabilities would contact me, and we would talk about their roles and what it was like and what to expect or not expect. We're now, of course, years later, and the Law Review has not one but two elevators in that little white clapboard building. And there's been an entire generation of law students with all kinds of disabilities who have been welcomed on and participate and likely don't know the history of exclusion. And I think that's a good thing. They're making this their own history. They're taking ownership of it and moving forward. The Law Review now makes accommodations to people when they try out for it on this week-long writing competition. They have an inclusion person who's on the board. It's come a long way. It's come a long way.
Wow, that is truly inspiring. I have to ask you, have you ever considered maybe doing a book or a film or a documentary, about the things that you have accomplished or the work that you're doing?
I'm not narcissistic enough to do that, but if at some point it makes sense to share in that sense, then maybe you or others could encourage me to do that. I've actually had conversations with my late wonderful friend Judy Human, who's an iconic disability rights advocate. We were friends for over 30 years, and she moved and pivoted towards writing a book, having her own podcast. There's going to be a movie done out of her book, which will be great. It's will remind us of her and make sure that we honor her memory the appropriate way. But we had conversations about that. I'm not sure I'm quite ready for it, but I'll listen to you.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. So many people would just be motivated, by their story, whether it's them personally or, like I say, I have family members or, for future generations. So I'm sure it'll happen. We're about 24 minutes in. I want to ask you about one more thing. You had kind of touched on it. You spoke about President Obama. Now, you were actually appointed by him to work in the United States Holocaust Memorial Council. If you could speak about that a little bit.
I was honored to work on to be a member of the Holocaust Council. The nomination likely came about because of my disability. My classmate Michelle was not aware that I come from my mother's side on Holocaust survivors. So I was added on as being able to add a disability and bioethics kind of perspective. Um, it was an honor to do so, to serve the country and to serve that cause. It was probably the most difficult public service that I've ever done. Not just in the sense of the emotional cost of working in areas on genocide, and the museum works not only historically but also contemporaneously. We met Rwanda survivors, we met Yazidi survivors. The empathy of understanding that the human condition for good and ill is one that we share. But it was incredibly difficult because there was a lot of committee work, and I'm not a genocide scholar. I'm not a Holocaust scholar. Um, And I got to work with people like Deborah Lipstadt, who was President Biden's anti-Semitism czarina through the Department of State, and they know so much more than me. So it was I got schooled. Um, I'm usually the disability expert or the human rights expert, and in this case, I just sat and listened and tried to participate and support as best I could. So it was a great learning experience, but a lot of work. A lot of work. I'm glad for it though.
Okay, okay. So yeah, this has been a tremendous honor. Thank you so much for all of the work that you have done, and I definitely look forward to the work that you have coming in the future. And I appreciate you taking out the time to stop by and school us and educate me and my viewers as well.
Thank you for having me, Taye.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.